We are live. We're just going to wait a moment for some people to jump in here. Welcome to all of you who are jumping in. We'd love it if you said hello and let us know who's here while we're waiting for more people to go ahead and jump into the call. So as we are waiting for people to jump into the call here, we have a question for you. We are curious to know how many dogs you have owned in your lifetime. How many dogs have you owned? Curious to know how experienced of a crowd we have here this evening. Some of you are first-time dog owners. Some of you are super veteran dog owners and ultimately probably want to become a dog trainer with us one day. So how many dogs have you had? Let's see what we've got here. Hello, Danny. Welcome back to the call. It's great to see you. 4 so far. I'm guessing they're all corgis, weren't they, Candace? They were definitely all corgis, I'm sure. Probably. Hello, Bonnie. Welcome. Thank you all for jumping on here. I know, I was a good guess, wasn't it? Well, we're going to dive in here in just a second, but for those of you that are just jumping in here, we would love to know how many dogs you've owned in your lifetime. For the rest of you, we are going to just go ahead and get started here. So real quickly, I just would like to go through some quick introductions. We have George and Jessica, two of our very veteran trainers here at DogiZone, and we would love to just do a quick introduction. So we'll just go ahead and ladies first. Jessica, if you would go ahead and just give us a quick update and tell us a little bit about yourself and how it is that you ended up at DogiZone.
Oh, so how I ended up at DogiZone. So I was actually a client before, being able to be graciously welcomed onto the team. I had gone through and trained a couple of my dogs, actually a Beagle and a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, in a bunch of classes and private lessons, and it just changed my life. I couldn't get enough of it, and I really wanted to stop my desk job and to really be able to help people. So after about maybe 6-7 years of being with you guys, I'm now the training team lead of the department. So it's been a great journey for me, and I'm happy to be here with the Ask the Trainer calls every week. It's just been a blessing to be able to help people.
Well, we're super, super grateful to have you, Jess. Thanks for jumping on with us. George, why don't you give everybody a little feedback about how you ended up here this evening?
How I ended up here? Oh, just because I enjoyed it so much. But no, I've been with you officially since 2015. Significantly more years than that. Prior to me having my own business. So you asked how many dogs people owned. I think I might be up there at 54. So over all the years, it's been 54 of them. Many times I had upwards of 10 or 10 plus, but there's plenty of dogs to own. A lot of dog food.
There's a lot of dog knowledge in that brain with 50 dogs there, George. Man,
yeah,
I'm
a lot of mistakes along the way too, but that's how you learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I thought being over 10 dogs was like kind of a lot, but not really, I guess. So, well, thank you all for jumping in here. We are doing this call strictly to help people out here and serve. So, if you know somebody who has a dog and they're struggling with them in some way, shape, or form, they could use some help in some way, we would love it if you just went ahead and invited them to this call so we can help you help them. We'd be more than happy to answer their questions and see what we can do to hopefully make life easier for them with their dog, which is our brand promise here at DogiZone. So before we get into the meat of things, I like to remind everybody, since the real purpose of this call is to help you all and to get you to take action with your dog, we'd love for you to get a piece of paper or a notebook and to draw a couple columns on there so that you can take notes about things that you might want to start doing, stop doing, or keep doing. Or if you have any breakthroughs where hey, you know what? That was absolutely amazing. I didn't know that. And it was just a big aha moment for you. You can throw those down on there. We'd love it also if you hear something and you have a breakthrough or a moment, just go ahead and type it into the chat bar for us. We'd love to know when we're delivering value to you. So give us a thumbs up, like, or something like that if you feel that something that we just delivered to you is of value, and that helps us to know when we're hitting on all cylinders. So before we really go into questions and that type of thing, I want to take a moment to talk about your dog training competence. And, I'm reading this weekend an article about competence. And, the interesting thing was, I was like, this is a great article. I'll share it with the team. So I shared it with the team. And then as I was sitting here preparing for this evening's call, I kind of came to the conclusion that a lot of people probably aren't aware of this competence thing. And so I want to detail this a little bit and help everybody to understand so that you can figure out really where it is that you're at in your dog's training, because I believe that most of the issues that people are experiencing are created by them. And they're created because they have an unconscious incompetence for what it is that they should be looking for with their dog. This would be, very similar to, it's pretty much you don't know what you don't know. And that's pretty much the simple way to put it. Some of you are at a level of what we call conscious competence, where you know that you don't know something, and you've probably been in touch with us, and we're probably helping you to get to another level, which is a level of conscious competence, which is where you're going to be able to use the skill of training your dog, but it's going to require a lot of focus, a lot of conscious effort on your part. It's kind of what happens when you first learn to drive a car. You need to put a lot of attention and focus. You need supervision. This is where a lot of you are at if you've been in training with us. But what I find is most people who have pets never reach the fourth level. And the fourth level is really where it is that we want to see all of you get with your dogs, which is unconscious competence, which means that you can do this pretty much with your eyes closed. You know exactly what to look for with your dog. You know exactly how to anticipate the things that they're going to do. And you're always a step ahead of them. And it allows you to really be one step dog. So I want you to think about what level of training competence are you at? Do you think that you are at that level of being able to do this without help at all? Or are you completely blind and do not see the things coming, and then you find out a week later that you've been doing it all wrong? Where do you fall on the spectrum? Again, it's unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. Just something for you all to think about and chew on a little bit here this evening. But without further ado, let's get into some questions. It's pretty hot outside tonight. I'm actually sweating pretty good here, so I'm going to let George and Jessica dive into our first question. My dog jumps on people like my kids. Does he need behavior modification and or obedience training? So how would you all approach this?
You want to go first, Jess, or you want me to?
Go ahead.
Well, behavior modification involves obedience training. Obedience training is a portion of behavior modification. So I think some people get confused about that. They think behavior modification is all in the head. You got to lay the dog on a couch and talk about their mother or something. But no, obedience training is an integral part of giving the dogs alternative behaviors counter to the ones you're trying to get rid of until they create habit. And then here's your behavior modification right there. You change their behavior. So that's the first thing. as far as how to keep them from jumping on your kids, I don't know if we want to address that now or later, but we have lots of cool things you can do with your children to get that under control in a very short order. Jess?
Oh, okay. I didn't realize you're done. So I think when we're talking about the difference between, again, the obedience training and the behavior modification, when we go with the obedience training side of things to get a dog to not jump on people, kids, guests, grandmas, what we're looking for is teaching the dog to sit politely for greeting. So getting the dog to sit to say please for those greetings, making sure that the dog understands how to hold that position, or maybe having the dog go to a place cot and sit and wait. Those are the obedience side of things. Now, with the modifying the behavior, there's a lot of different ways that we can help the dogs understand. And one of the best things, and George, you can jump in and whenever you want to, but one of the biggest exercises that we teach kids, and it works for adults alike, is to play freeze tag with the dogs.
Let me explain that out for the parents out there. So it'll take a couple of minutes, but trust me, you can be doing it tonight and seeing a difference. So when you have younger kids and a new dog, the dog oftentimes will, of course, jump on the kids, and the kids play rough and they squeal and carry on. And that turns the dog on. It becomes a big old game to the dog. And the more the dog jumps and the more the child becomes upset, the more fired up the dog becomes. So here's what I want you to do, parents. I want you to put together a dog trainer uniform for your children. Here's what it consists of. Shoes with toes, no stocking feet, no bare feet. That way, when the dog jumps on their feet, the kids don't dance. A pair of heavier pants, like a pair of blue jeans or something like that, of some substance, nothing wispy. No, underoos and stuff like that. That way the child's legs are armored, so when the pup jumps up, it doesn't hurt the child near as much, so the kid can stay still. And then depending on the height of the child, you might want to put a long sleeve shirt of some substance like flannel or even a sweatshirt. I know it's 90 degrees, but it's only for a few days. Whenever they're going to engage with the dog, tell them to go put on their dog trainer uniform. And whenever the pup starts getting fired up and jumping up on the kid, I want you to have them take your hands. I have a very small screen here. So you take their hands and have them put their hands underneath their armpits, like so. Cover those hands. They stand up, stand still, look up at the ceiling, and absolutely freeze. What you'll start seeing is at about 30-second mark, the pup will jump off and walk away, at which time the child is free to move on. What'll probably happen is said pup will come in for more. Call freeze tag. They do that whole move again. In a few days, all the kid's going to have to do when the dog is coming in hot is stand up and cross their arms like so. I don't know if y'all can see that, but anyway, cross your arms, and that pup's going to start taking that as a signal. Nope, no joy this time, no play at this moment. So there's the short of it, but I inspire the children by telling them it's their dog trainer uniform. That way they don't argue with you about putting it on. There you go.
Very strategic. Very strategic. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think that at the end of the day here, when you think about behavior modification and obedience training, I look at using both when really trying to get a dog to not jump on somebody. Ultimately, I think that, the behavior modification side to me tends to be a lot about teaching the owner how to behave so that they change their behavior in the presence of their dog and in certain situations. So kind of what you're describing there to me, with playing freeze tag with the dog is really in line with, what we would do from a behavior modification perspective. And, the obedience things is really kind of channeling that dog's energy into productive things that we want them to do. And is, generally, in my much more proactive approach to handling the dog. So, when you're being proactive and you're also, introducing the right type of approaches to modifying the behavior that you're dealing with, can be really powerful. So this kind of takes us like right into the next question, actually, that we were going to talk about. We actually briefly broke into this last week, but it's how dogs communicate. And one of those ways is body language. And, George, we could probably explain more about that body language piece here, since that feeds right into this next one here. But if you want to just walk us through how dogs communicate, and Jess, if you want to build off of that.
Sure.
All right. Well, something I've been preaching for years is that dogs only communicate 4 ways. And I don't believe that there's another way. There's 4. You have eye contact, you have body language, you have voice inflection, not so much what you're saying, but how you're saying it. And then you have scent. Well, scent isn't very useful to us because we don't have the tools, So let's get scent out of the picture. So if you look at that mathematically, that at best on a perfect day, we can communicate at a 75% basis. We only have 3 out of the 4 that they use as main forms of communication. So eye contact, it's not, a lot of people here don't stare at dogs. Yeah, you shouldn't stare at a dog, but it's more what's behind your eyes than actually staring at the dog. You can have love behind your eyes and your dog will light up with love. And if you have anger behind your eyes, they pick up on that too. But body language is really powerful. If you're staying down low and jumping around as kids will do, and many adults, I might add, the pup's going to look at you as another member, kind of a play toy. Whereas when you're standing upright, like I mentioned a few moments ago, having those children stand up straight and be still, that's a different body language altogether. I don't really get into the whole dominance and submission argument. That's kind of silly to me, but it is a more assertive, or at least certain posture. So dogs pick up on that too. So if you're trying to get your dog to stop jumping, since we're on that subject, bending over to them and arguing with them is actually going to make things worse. Whereas if you stand up and are less than impressed, they tend to stop burning fuel on that. Okay. And then of course the inflection you use, if you used real high pitched squeaky protestations, again, that's barking at your dog, and they'll tend to start firing up on that, and there's no authority behind it, nor do you have to yell at the dog. I don't believe in that either. I talk to my dogs in a very certain tone, and they hear me fine out to hundreds of yards. You don't really need to scream anything. And if there's anger behind there, you're into intimidation. Now the dog's worried about you. And so there's a whole lot of stuff to go into on this. But eye contact, body language, and voice inflection are what you have, and you might want to develop the skills on how to use those to maximum effect. There you go, Jess.
Awesome.
No, I agree 100%. I don't think there's anything that I would add.
Okay. Awesome. No problem at all. Yeah. I am in complete agreement there. So let's talk a little bit about, ultimately, we got a good question here that really goes to talking about selecting a breed. So somebody's family is getting a dog. How should we choose a breed? Are there any harder to train than others? And should we rescue or should we get one from the breeder? So Jeff, why don't you? What's that, George?
I said loaded question on that one.
Yeah.
Oh, it is fully loaded. And, here's the thing, like, I think that, I don't know that there's a wrong answer here. It really depends on the need of the person. So, Jess, let's break it down. Let's start off with the first part of this. How should somebody choose a breed?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, I can remember back when I was much younger, there were certain breeds of dogs that I absolutely admired and adored. Whether it was, Rin Tin Tin in the movies, or whether it was Benji, or, think about all the dogs growing up that were very, I ideology for us. In our adult life, a lot of times we reminisce about some breeds of dogs that we always dreamt of having. I think the biggest thing when we're going through and talking about how to choose a breed of dog is look at the most number one important thing is to look at what your lifestyle is like, what your schedule is like, and what type of energy of a dog, what type of energy that you really want in a dog. If you are a homebody and a couch potato, you might not consider getting a Belgian Malinois. If you're a very active person, you may not consider getting, an Old English Bulldog. So you really want to get a breed that matches your lifestyle, and something that you can keep up with, and that they can also keep up with you, depending on what that kind of looks like in terms of the breed for you. So obviously, looking at the American Kennel Club has a very nice quiz on their website that you can answer various amounts of questions to see what type of breed would be a good fit for you when trying to make those decisions.
Yeah, that's great. George, do you want to add anything to the choosing of the?
Yeah, I do. There's a lot there in that question. We could spend days on this one, but more so than the breed, a particular breed, most people look at breeds and they're looking at the aesthetics of it, the beauty of it. You got to remember, a breed is part of a type. So let's say there's retrievers, for instance, working dogs. All right. There's many breeds within that group, or working dogs, etc. And those types of dogs all have general tendencies that you may or may not find useful in your life with the dog. Like working dogs, like we have a Doberman, and she's busy, man. And if you're the type that wants real quiet, she's quiet. She don't make a lot of noise, but she's busy. She's always moving. If you're not that type of person, that's not a dog I'd pick, or a type of dog that I'd pick. If you're into a laid back dog, sometimes some of the giant breeds are the most laid backs of all, so you look at that. So you look at the type of dog and then choose your breed within that type. You just blocked me out there, Hudgy. So anyway, keep that in mind when you're looking. Look at the type of dog you want first, and then go within the breeds within that type. Because again, the type has general tendencies that you may or may not want. And then some breeds within the type will have more of those tendencies. Like a German Shepherd versus a Malinois is the difference between a Corvette and a Ferrari. There's one's a little more high strung than the other. So keep that in mind. Do we want to address the rescue or breeder?
Yeah, I'm gonna add to what you guys just said here, and then we'll dive into the other portion of this question here. So, when you think about dog breed, I think you really need to think about also where is it that you live. Some communities, some apartment, condo, townhome, whatever, will have breed restrictions. It's nothing worse than getting a dog, falling in love with it, find out 14 days later that the dog is actually not allowed in your community. That can be a real problem. Finding out from your homeowner's insurance if they have any prohibited breeds. These are things that a lot of people fail to look at, and it can be a rude surprise later on, finding out that you might lose your homeowner's insurance or your place of residence. So that can be a real factor that you should pay attention to. The other side of it is thinking about the cost aspect of it. I hate saying it, but bigger dog, more money. You're going to be feeding more food. You're going to be needing the larger size front line. You're going to need the larger size medication when your dog goes to the vet. They're going to need a larger size enclosure when they come to a facility. There's a lot of different things that play into the size of the dog and the cost that dog is going to have. So being really clear on budget, what it is that you feel comfortable spending, can make a huge difference. There's some great health insurance and things like that out now to really be able to keep your costs down on the medical side of things. But I definitely think that cost would be factored into to this as well. But yeah, there's so much. I mean, we really could spend like a day on this, but we won't do that. So George, what breeds do you think are harder to train than others, in your opinion? Or
Again, let's go type. All right. Dogs that are designed to be more independent of man, dogs that are designed to, in their ultimate ancestral work, didn't have to be directed as much. Shepherding dogs, things like that, are a little more inclined to want to work independent. Where Labradors or Goldens have been bred to actually work very closely with us. So they're more inclined to take to direction a little easier. You take your Siberian Huskies, they're notorious for being hard to train. I don't feel they're hard to train if you know what they're about, but they're designed to basically get locked on and pull. So that's what they do. And then people come to us and want them to not pull, So you have to look at that. As far as what breeds are harder, I look at each dog as an individual unit in front of me. So I'm not the guy to ask that question. I really believe that in my core. I'm looking at that exact dog in this exact moment as to what it is. And I've been at it long enough where I come to a good solution pretty quick and find the right way and the best way to train that dog, which therefore makes it easy.
excellent. Jessica, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would, the one thing that I would like to add when talking about like what breeds or what types of dogs can be harder, a little bit more easier to train. It really depends on what you're trying to train. In the grand scheme of things, whether it's basic obedience, recall, sit, down, leash work, the dogs are going to have natural tendencies, as George said. Beagles, and I love beagles. We grew up with beagles, but they have a tendency when I keep their nose to the ground and sniff, because what in the big picture, what were they bred to do? But being able to train the dog exactly for what the owner is looking at for, I don't know that I would say that there's one that's harder to train than the other. It just depends on what the expectations you're setting with the family that you're working with. Foxy.
Yeah, I mean, I think Foxy is really, she's just trying to get in it here. Yeah, she's going to answer this next question for us. Fox, you got this one? She said, no, I prefer you to answer it. So, yeah, pretty much, when you think about dogs that are harder to train than others, I think that, I usually look a lot more at the personality, but you find that you have a dog that's a real low drive dog, like a bulldog. Teaching that dog agility, certainly, like said Jessica, wouldn't be a real easy to do. But I look at the drive of the dog. I think that higher drive dogs tend to be easier to train, but it all really depends on what it is, again, that you're training them to do. But, I've found that, there's certain things with certain breeds that can be harder to train. So, for instance, with like an Italian Greyhound, teaching Italian Greyhounds to do a down can be very challenging. They have no padding. They have no insulation. They're, skin, bone, and muscle pretty much. And so laying down on asphalt or a cold floor, things like that can be very challenging. So it can take a lot more effort to get that dog downing than it would, say, a Labrador who's got plenty of insulation and padding. But let's go to the next part of this question. Should we rescue or get one from the breeder? This is like the loaded question right here, right? Yeah. Again, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer because everybody's situation's different, but maybe we kind of answer this. We can talk about like, what are the things that what are some of the reasons why you should choose to use a breeder, or what are some of the reasons that you should choose to use a rescue? Maybe we can just break those two down. They're both fine options. There's no wrong option here. It's really just about what's best for you and your situation. Jessica, you want to start us off?
Yeah, when making that decision, I mean, and that again, that's a loaded question. It comes down to, do you have the setup? Because a lot of rescues are going to ask for a fenced-in backyard. If you have a second dog, they want to make sure that the dog's a good fit for the other dog. In going through, but it's personal preference for that. And I guess the other thing is that the age of the dog that you're adopting or rescuing. Obviously, from a breeder, most of the time people are getting puppies. I will say, in this whole pandemic that we've been going through, there's been a lot of puppies that have been purchased from a breeder, but that have also been rescued from some local organizations. And when it comes down to it, we just have to make sure that it's the family's decision as a whole. So the age of the dog, where it's coming from, what type of history that the dog has, if you can get any of that, how many members of the family, are there kids involved? So there's a lot of things when getting a rescue dog that's going to take into consideration with that.
Excellent. George?
Yeah. Rescue versus, I mentioned at the beginning of tonight's meeting that I had 54 dogs throughout the years, probably 50-50 roughly bought versus rescued. I've rescued purebred dogs, from breeders, or not from breeders, but that had come from breeders. So I have a lot to say about this. If you're getting a dog for a specific task, maybe going hunting, maybe, I don't know, something the dog was bred to do, I'm going to suggest a very high quality breeder of said dog. That doesn't mean a rescue mixed breed, for instance, can't do the work. It's just you're more likely to get what you're after by going to a dog that's purpose bred for that job. I've had plenty of mixed breed dogs that would spank a purebred dog all day long in obedience and everything else. But if you have a specific task, I said, you're going to hunt ducks, I'm not going to go get a French bulldog. I'm going to go with a Labrador, a Golden, Chesapeake Bay, or even a Poodle. So that said, if you have a specific task and go with a breeder. As far as all the dogs out there that need our help, by all means, rescue before you purchase. If you don't have anything specific you're trying to get with a purebred dog, by all means, rescue. Either way, it's a crapshoot as far as what you're going to end up with, really. Because you have to train the dog. You have to develop the dog in front of you. So I've seen some very poorly bred dogs that would be lousy in homes. Purpose-bred dogs. And then I've seen rescue dogs that were fantastic, but I've seen just as many rescue dogs that not so much. So you have to do your homework and don't get stuck up with the beauty of the dog immediately. Once you get that kind of idea of a dog you want, and you start doing your homework, and it wouldn't hurt if you get in touch with us. We'll be happy to help guide you. Tell us what you're about, and we'll throw you some suggestions out to you. And I'm not above it. If somebody can bring me a potential rescue, I'll be happy to assess the dog for them. And I'm sure any one of our other trainers will be happy to do the same. So it's your choice. Look at the big picture of what your end use is. Most people being into the pet things, by all means, I suggest rescue. You can rescue puppies. Maybe you don't want to go through puppy stuff. Maybe you want to get something a little older. You never truly know the complete history of your rescue dog. Remember that too. It's very rare we get somebody that knows the true history of the dog they just adopted from a rescue that was just brought up from Texas or somewhere. So be aware of that.
Yep. I mean, we've had even dogs that have been, dogs from other countries, that were brought to the U.S. and adopted out. And, we're able to do that. I think, to me, one of the big, most people make a very emotional decision when it comes to getting the dog. Most people, I don't think, use a lot of logic when purchasing or adopting a dog. I think emotion gets pulled in, and causes us to make decisions that may ultimately end up being very, hard or painful decisions down the road. I think the best thing that somebody can do is to do a little bit of research of interviewing in person and going and meeting, two different rescue groups and two different breeders that, have dogs that you might be interested in. So much of, this is figuring out, who do you trust? Who do you think is going to really be somebody that you can trust? If things are not going well, if there's going to be a problem, that you can, they're going to stand behind the dog, whether that be, health-wise or behaviorally or whatever the case may be. So it's just something to think about is, really, really ask yourself, is what I want here emotional, logical? Nothing wrong with having some emotion put into your decision, but I think that it needs to be balanced. So,
yeah.
Do either of you want to add anything?
Remember, it's like a 15-year, it's a 15-year situation on the average dog's life, or longer.
Yep.
So, you really want to spend a few minutes now and really make a good decision, because your kids are probably going to be in college by the time it's time to get a new dog.
Right.
100%.
Yep.
100%. It's funny. Like Kayla's 16 on October 1st, and I was looking at a friend of mine on Facebook. She does agility with her dogs, and her dog just turned 18.
Wow.
Border collies. So like, the age of these dogs seems to be increasing longer and longer, and I think that that's due to a lot of the medical advances that are out there for dogs, and which is really, really awesome to see. But that being said, it does definitely lengthen the commitment, and you want to make sure that you're really making the right choice. So let's move on from this one. There's a lot to that, but for those of you that are just got a dog or that you're thinking about getting a dog, this is a question I got from somebody the other day when I was meeting with them, and thought it would just be a great one for us to talk about here. So what's the proper age to start training my dog? And then, how much do I really expect dogs based on their age? We're not going to certainly expect a 8-week-old puppy to respond off leash to you, to commands around distraction. But, there's some stuff to think about there, because, sometimes I think sometimes we're going too fast with our training, and sometimes we might be going too slow with our training as well. So what is the right pace, and where is it that we should really be? I think our next one after this, we'll be talking about the Icy Hella dog training. We kind of talk about pace there. Why don't we maybe get into what's the right starting point, and what should we expect from them?
Yeah, training starts the second you meet that dog. It starts the minute that dog and you are starting to bond. So in everything from teaching the dogs boundaries in the house training. So you want to look at being able to set up certain expectations with the dogs. The proper age is the minute that they come home, the moment that they step foot in the door, and thinking about what that looks like in terms of breaking it into developmental cycles. I could go down a rabbit hole, and don't let me, on discussing different developmental cycles of the puppy, from the fear impact periods to flight instinct to fear impact 2. But really being able to develop the dog in the proper socialization periods that they're in is really the most important thing to look at.
Awesome. George?
Yeah. Can't agree more with Jess. Whether everybody likes it or not, that puppy's learning whether you're applying knowledge or not. So, they're learning when you're not training per se. You're training at all times when you're raising a pup. So you might as well do it right and be aware. Awareness is your friend, about what you're allowing to happen right now. You might want to get on top of that. It's not a session thing when you're raising a puppy. It's
I say a lot of the time,
conservation.
either by design or by default, right?
Right.
They're going to learn
Exactly.
design or
Yep.
default, so gotta make by design. Default usually doesn't work out so well for most people.
No.
That's awesome. What do you think? What do you think's reasonable to expect from an 8-week-old puppy? You know, what should we really expect? Like, how long can we really train an 8-week-old puppy for? How many minutes?
I mean, 5 to 10 tops in a session, you know, really, if you're breaking it down and depending on what you're teaching. You know, I know with little Buckshot, we brought him home a little early. He was about 7.5 weeks. But we would just do 5 or 6 minute sessions here and there of teaching him the name game, teaching him to sit for his food, working on crate training. I'll be completely transparent. I don't know that I taught him a down until he was probably about 4 months old. You know, I took my time with him because it wasn't anything that I had to rush into. Anytime you rush to get any training in, you know, nothing, and that goes with anything, not just dog training, but anytime you rush to get something done, it's not going to be to get in as fluently as you want it to be. So think about really what that imprint period looks like.
Excellent. So, George, what are your thoughts? I mean, let's say the dog's 6 months. What should we expect reasonably from a 6-month-old dog?
Well, I'd expect him to perform what I've shown him up to that point is what I'd expect. But that aside, pup at that age, 6 months, he should be attentive, responsive to his name, following you at a pretty good rate, you know, a high percentage. He'd probably learn a little sit at 6 months, maybe a little down. I don't get too bent on real complicated behaviors when they're that age. It's more about during those younger months, aside the obedience as part of this is where I'm teaching the dog how to be and what's going to fly in its life and what's not going to fly. So there's more to it than sit or down or stay. I expect that dog to be housebroken by 6 months for sure. His chewing should be well under control. There's a lot more going on than just sits and downs, you know. So that's what I'd expect of them. But each dog, as I mentioned earlier, is an individual. Some going to be a little ahead of the curve. Some going to be a little behind the curve. Patience is a virtue. So,
yeah, I think it all comes down to, you know, how much prevention people have in place in terms of where that dog will actually be at 6 months. Because I've trained my dogs and I've seen other people train their dogs to a level of off-leash control that's pretty reliable by 6 months of age. But it definitely just is going to vary from dog to dog. I want to go ahead. If you that have questions that you'd like to get answered, we're going to be starting to wrap things up here. So if you have questions, go ahead and throw them into the chat bar. We will do our best to get them here. But before we dive into questions, we're going to talk about the Icy Hill of dog training because we spent a little bit of time on this last week, and thought it'd be good for George to go ahead and walk us through what the Icy Hill of dog training is, because I think that this is it's one of those things a lot of people trap to. George.
Okay, the Icy Hill of dog training. This is a little concept I came up with years ago to explain the phenomena that so many trainers go through with their training clients. So we have a pretty good idea that it takes 30 to 45 days, roughly 6 weeks, for a dog to truly get those behaviors kind of really habituated and imprinted, or whatever else you want to call it. So you got this like 6 week window. We call it 30 to 45 days in our teachings so people understand. But yet most trainers will report that when they start a training regimen with a client, the client will get real fired up about the training and really get into it and do what they're supposed to be doing. at the beginning, but then it's weird thing, around the two week mark, they started hitting the brakes. So the worst thing you can do when driving up an icy hill, in the middle of driving up the icy hill, is hit your brakes and lose your momentum. So around the 2 week mark, the dog's looking good. He's had 2 weeks of training, and then they start slacking off and not enforcing as much and not practicing as much. And what happens is that dog's performance starts going downhill. And then a couple of weeks later, when the people realize what's happening, they get back on the stick and they start again, and they really get into it again. And around 2 weeks or so, they start getting sloppy again. And it becomes this never-ending cycle of going halfway up an icy hill or even a third of the way up and then getting stuck. And the dog never really gets the behavior committed to memory. So what I'm doing here real quick, I'm drawing a little picture. 30 to 45 days. I don't know. Can you see that, Jess?
No.
No.
There it is.
It's a bad. So no picture this week. So anyway, they keep going up in this cycle: up, stop, back down, up, stop, back down, and it gets becoming a never-ending little cycle of halfway done and then quitting. This is why we see so many dogs that come to us and they'll say, well, I had puppy class or I had dog training class somewhere else. And I'll say, okay, tell your dog to sit. And the dog can't really sit yet at any distance because it never got committed to the dog's memory. So that's what we call about don't get stuck on the icy hill. Now, a couple more things about an icy hill. If you try to go too fast up an icy hill, you spin your wheels and get all twisted out of shape and end up stuck down at the bottom of the hill again. So you can overtrain your dog. And then, of course, if you try to just idle up the icy hill, you're never going to get to the top. You have no momentum. So that's what we at DogiZone can call the icy hill analogy. And it makes a lot of sense. And it goes a lot better if I have a huge whiteboard and a room full of people when I'm on a rant. But that's the icy hill of dog training.
Awesome. That's great. We are going to go ahead and wrap things up here, but we did have a couple of things come in, so I want to answer those questions here quickly. First off, hey, Molly and Matt and Jennifer and Tabitha. Max the Toad says hello. That's awesome. Welcome. And let's answer this next question here, which is Max is huge, and his new trick is to tell to whatever it is that's on the counter. Is there a way to break this besides putting him back on the leash? How should this be handled?
Well, to start, putting him back on the leash is going to be able to help you control that a little bit easier. On a couple of previous calls, we went into depth talking about a couple of other ways, whether it's using investing in the invisible fence system, the indoor units to be able to help the dogs with targeting up on countertops or getting in on the dining room tables. But the easiest thing to start with is to put him back on the leash in the house so you can control each moment that he's about to make a bad choice. From there, you can use a behavior disruptor with the out or the ouch to be able to get him to negate the jumping. But we really have to teach him, one, when we're there, how to be able to come off of the countertops, when he's jumping up and trying to serve himself something to eat.
That's awesome. Yeah, you guys got it there. I'm not going to add a whole lot to that there. The question that we got here are any tips for rear leg targeting? So it sounds like Jennifer's working on going on a 4 small pods. So it sounds like Jennifer's working on some fit pods and teaching her dog to target its back 2 feet onto the 2 pods, which is not an easy task, and teaching rear foot targeting is not necessarily an easy thing. I would, just for the sake of the call here, and us not necessarily being able to demonstrate that, I would tell you that you want to make this really easy for the dog in the beginning. Find something to get the dog to target their rear paws into that's very large. A lot of the times I use things like curbs in a parking lot, where I can just have the dog next to the curb, and I can ultimately use that curb as a target, because there's a lot of space there. It's not like trying to get my dog to place a foot on a quarter or an index card. It's a completely different ball game. So once we start to get the behavior of getting the dog to target, then we can gradually make those targets smaller and smaller and smaller. It's also really important to make sure that you're rewarding the dog at the right time. Sometimes luring the dog to try to do this type of thing can be very difficult. So I tend to not use a lot of luring to teach rear foot targeting, but use some other approaches. I don't know if either of you want to add to that. It's a little bit more challenging to answer without demo here. And welcome. You're not late. It's okay. I mean, we're ending, but we're so glad that you made it anyways. So anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is that usually when I'm starting to teach like rear end awareness drills, I might teach the dog to put his front paws up on like a rubber feed ball or a place board and work on some like heel placement. So then they're being able to target moving their back feet. And then maybe even teaching the dog to start to walk backwards up onto a place board, using the back feet first. And then from there you can teach and reward the targeting the one paw on one specific object. But it's a challenge. It's not an easy task to teach. It's fun when the dog can do it, but the going through the process of it is important.
Yeah, I taught Foxy to walk backwards, a reverse command, and then I started teaching her to reverse upstairs so that she could walk up backwards. And she's like a rear paw targeting little machine now. I haven't put her on the pods. Those are a bit small, and I haven't gotten to that yet with her. But definitely good to hear that somebody's working on some fitness at home with their dogs. I believe that Jennifer has old Armstrong in the academy, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong. I think so.
I think you're right.
Thank you for the question there, Jennifer, and thank you all of you that jumped on here this evening. We're always grateful to see how many people jump on here, and the great questions that you all submit to us, and some of the questions that we just get through our interactions with the clients here at the office right now. We like to bring some of that to you all as well. So if you all have any questions at all, we would love it if you would send them to us. You can submit them to us however it is that you can get them to us. So if you want to put them on Facebook, or if you want to send it to us in an email, or I don't know, if you want to send us postal mail, I think we'd be cool with that too. But please send us your questions. Jess, I'm thinking we're not going to do this call next week. I think we're going to take a week off. We're going to have a little bit of a gap, and we are going to wait until the following week before we hold our next call. So just so you all know, it will not be on the 10th. We will hold our next call on the 17th. So go ahead and mark your schedules now for the 17th at 7:00 p.m. We'd love to see you all back. Oh, no, I saw a bunch of faces. Maybe if we get too many sad faces, then we're going to have to do the call next week. But we'll maybe we can do it. I don't know. We're planning for next week. We'd love to see you there. Thank you all so much for joining. We would love it if you would just give us a like and share this with your friends and family so that we can help to serve more people. And you know where to find us if there is anything at all that we can do to serve you. Have a better than great evening. Talk to you soon.